Hey everyone, happy Monday. Stephanie, before we dive in today, I just have to share that I am having one of the worst headaches that I've had in a very long time. And not in oh my God, you need to go to the doctor right now at this very moment way, but I am like the the words are swimming on the page a little bit. So if I kind of just trail off or sound like I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, that's why it's the headache.
Well, I give you all the credit in the world for actually recording right now because my husband gets those headaches and I know how debilitating they are, where, I mean, he can't function, he can't do anything. So I get it. And if you need to pause, we'll just pause the podcast. So if there's like an awkward silence, that's why.
Yeah, so just sorry guys up front, but I'm gonna do my best to get through this because there is a lot of shit that went down this past weekend.
As
And let
usual.
Yeah, I swear, like Fridays, after we finish recording on Fridays, there's like a barrage of shit that happens
Oh,
Friday
yeah.
afternoon through the weekend. So I think one of the biggest stories from this weekend is that there were three major Supreme Court rulings that came down after our episode on Friday. And I'm so excited that they are all big victories for the Trump admin. And there were very clear breakdowns across party lines. And I know we've talked in past episodes about how, like, Amy Coney Barrett was making some really fucking weird decisions. And I'm happy to say that this time she sided with conservatives on every decision. And the first one was limits on nationwide injunctions. And this was a 6-3 decision. They were all 6-3 decisions, but the court restricted the lower court's ability to issue universal injunctions, which is what we've watched them do for the last few months with trying to stop pretty much every one of Trump's executive orders. So the Supreme Court ruling states that injunctions must now apply only to specific parties involved and that they can't be universally broad unless it would be necessary for the case. So this ruling basically gives power back to the executive branch and shields them from sweeping judicial blocks. And yes, I think this is fucking awesome for the Trump admin, but this also opens the door for the next administration to do the same. And if we get a liberal president next time, we could be fucked.
Yeah, but I didn't realize until this ruling came out that really like Trump, this is the first time in US history that it's been used in this way against a president. Like it's only been used in the last few presidencies, but mostly with Trump. So this isn't something that's like been around forever and this has always happened with every administration. It is pretty unique to him. And so I think it's huge because I mean, my God, everything he does, they try to block him. And Amy Coney Barrett, like I was really surprised because, like you said, she's been voting more with like the liberal judges, but she had a rebuttal to one of the liberal judges because she was saying, you're constantly saying that the executive branch, like the presidency, shouldn't have just sweeping, they shouldn't be able to do whatever they want. Yet you seem to want that for the judicial branch. So, like, you can't have it both ways. Like there's limits on both. And I thought that was such a good argument. And I think this will be huge. I'm sure they'll still find their little loopholes
Oh,
to
yeah.
issue injunctions, but at least this gives some protection.
Yeah. And I hope that at least Trump will do good things with this for the next 3.5 years.
Yeah.
So the second ruling is actually related to my state of Texas, where the Supreme Court upheld a Texas law that mandates users to verify their age with valid ID or some kind of transactional data if they want to access porn sites. And this was another 6-3 split. And whether you agree with it or not, it's pretty much a win for state sovereignty and for parental protections in states that do want to enforce moral or child protection regulations online. And you've got civil liberty advocates who are saying this is an infringement on the First Amendment and it's imposing privacy burdens. But I give it to the courts for siding with protecting minors.
I think we're going to see like people just stop going to porn sites in Texas because no one's going to want to put in their like ID to go,
Exactly.
if they're an adult. But here's the thing, even on social media platforms like TikTok, you don't have to put in your ID, but you do have to verify that you're like above the age of 13, I think it is for social media. So, I mean, I feel like that should be a given for something like a porn site. It shouldn't just be anyone can go on at any time. It could be, I mean, it is. A lot of children are accessing this stuff.
Well, yeah, because all they have on there is like a little thing like when you go on an alcohol site, the same thing. Are you over 21 or I don't know if it's
Right.
21 or 18 on porn sites, whatever. But all you have to do is like click the button. There's no verification of anything. It's just you're clicking the button and that's it.
Yeah.
So I am in support of this. And the third big decision was also a win for parents because it was related to the parental opt-out from LGBTQXYZIA, blah, 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 content being taught in schools. And the court ruled that parents can exclude their children from school lessons that involve books or materials about these LGBTQ plus themes. And I think this is great because it gives parents control over their children's educational content, which should be their constitutional right in the first place. So now schools can't force kids to participate in the ideological nonsense against the will of the child's parents. But Stephanie, what do you want to bet that schools in liberal cities are just going to find a workaround and continue to do this anyway and just lie about it?
Oh, yeah. I think some of them have flat out said they're going to just not follow the law, which is absolutely ridiculous. And they should lose, funding over that. But this is a huge win for parents, for common sense. And this is the second case in the past 2 weeks that have to do with the whole LGBTQ theme. We discussed, I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, when the Supreme Court did the ruling where they upheld Tennessee's ban on transgender treatments for minors. And remember, I was saying, like, I bet this is going to open the door for detransitioners and their families to sue doctors and healthcare systems that did this irreversible harm. Well, there is a new assistant attorney general, Harmeet Dhillon. A lot of people probably remember her. She's been all over, like the news circuit for years. But she went on Morning Wire and talked about how the people and institutions involved in this, so-called gender affirming care should not only be sued in civil courts, but in some instances should be held criminally liable. So listen to this clip of her on Morning Wire.
Very clear. Institutions that have peddled this gender transition surgery and treatment on mainly girls with some boys in the United States have committed wholesale fraud, wholesale malpractice, misconduct in so many ways, coercion against parents, manipulation, telling parent after parent that their child would commit suicide if they didn't sign off on this mutilation procedure or removing breasts or otherwise. And while people in my prior life are seeking to hold these folks accountable civilly, I do think it's a criminal matter in some instances, and that may be a state criminal matter that can be brought. But the pharma industry has a lot to answer for. Big medical institutions like Kaiser in California have a lot to answer for. And, we're doing our part in the Civil Rights Division to share our knowledge of these issues and be part of those resolutions.
So she's only been the assistant attorney general for a few weeks, and she is making huge waves. She was saying people are leaving left and right because there's a whole bunch of woke people in the department. And, she's like, this is a great thing because we're seeing kind of like a mass exodus of the people trying to just push the woke ideology. But she was saying with those cases, you can't bring them federally, I guess. Like she can't bring them, but the state attorney generals can. And it sounds like she's really trying to help them build their cases for that. So I think we're going to see a lot more coming with transgender, affirming care, whatever lawsuits. But she's in the civil rights division of the Department of Justice. And she was talking about how she's going back through all of these files from the Biden and Obama administrations and how they literally like they were cherry picking certain civil rights violations while completely ignoring others, and how her focus is to change that in the Trump administration. So For example, the DOJ would take cases where someone's praying across the street from an abortion clinic and like prosecute them, but then they would completely ignore cases where pregnancy help centers were vandalized or, like in some cases, bombed. They would
I
just completely
remember
ignore
this.
those. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're going back through there, and she was asking the public, like, if you have information, now is the time to bring it forward. Because she said people were afraid to bring it forward before just because of the Biden administration. But then she was also bringing up how certain groups were protected while others were completely ignored. And her example was how Asians, white people, and men have received discrimination in admissions for higher education and employment, and how that is illegal. And this DOJ is going to start going after that. So again, I think we're going to see this tie into like all the Ivy League woke schools that have been completely discriminating certain people.
Yeah, that's exactly what needs to happen because the discrimination that went on during the Biden admin, I remember talking about it and we would get so like riled up and so pissed because it was so clearly biased. And there's no
Mhm.
way you can defend the type of bias that was going on.
Yeah.
So, another major thing that happened this weekend, this was on Saturday. This is going back to Trump's big, beautiful bill, and the Senate narrowly advanced the procedural vote to start debating on it. And they got the majority vote of 51 to 49, with every Republican voting for it, including the ones who said that they wouldn't. And the only two who did not vote or who voted no from the Republican side was Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina. And I guess he opposed the cuts to federal funding that would harm rural hospitals in North Carolina. And then Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, who was objecting to the 5 trillion increase in the debt ceiling and just overall fiscal responsibility.
Okay,
But
why this is what I was saying in I think the last episode. Why was Trump going after Massey and not Rand Paul? Like, remember I was like, oh, Rand Paul must have jumped on the bandwagon or whatever, but he didn't. So why is he just going after Massey? That's a rhetorical question. We don't know, but I'm
it's
just going to throw
Trump,
it out there.
right? But the flip vote actually came from Ron Johnson from Wisconsin because he initially voted no and then apparently went behind closed doors with JD Vance, who was there in case they needed a tiebreaker. But then JD Vance wasn't needed because Johnson changed his vote to yes. And remember last week, I was talking about how the Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough had ruled that four of the Medicaid provisions violated the Byrd rule for reconciliation bills. So if they kept everything in there, the 51 majority would not have worked. They would have had to do a 60 vote filibuster. But the provisions were either taken out or modified to the point where they satisfied her concerns enough to allow the revised language in the bill. So, what changed? There were a few things. The idea of a federal ban on Medicaid coverage for gender affirming care was dropped from the bill, which I thought was disappointing, but that doesn't mean it's dead. It just means it's not going to be part of the big, beautiful bill. And they could probably pursue a separate standalone bill outside of this reconciliation bill. Or who knows, maybe Trump will try to issue an executive order under like HHS authority. The proposal to limit Medicaid coverage for non-citizens was scaled back. So instead of like limiting coverage overall, it will end coverage for non-emergency services for undocumented migrants only. So Medicaid will still continue to cover refugees, DACA recipients, and green card holders within federal guidelines. So now this provision no longer violates the Byrd rule because it directly reduces federal spending tied to non-citizens who have no legal status in the states. The mandated federal work requirements for able-bodied adults aged 19 to 55 as a condition for eligibility for Medicaid was changed from a federal mandate to an optional state work requirement. But the caveat here is that federal matching funds will be reduced by 2 to 5% for states that refuse to institute work requirements. So now this ties the provision directly to budgetary impacts, which now satisfies the Byrd rule. I keep wanting to say bird flu. So now they, all the revisions they did and things they got rid of, they got the consensus they needed. But of course, even though the Republican majority advanced the bill, we have the usual congressional clown show theatrics at play here. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats, Stephanie, they forced the clerk to read the entire bill out loud on the Senate floor before they would agree to debate the bill. Now, this is a 464 page bill, and the reading started at 2:15 p.m. on Saturday, and it continued for over 20 hours. And the reason I'm laughing is because it's beyond ridiculous and hilarious to me that the same politicians forcing the Senate clerk to read Trump's bill out loud for 20 hours straight are the ones who didn't read a single page out of Biden's 4,100 page omnibus spending bill. In fact, it was 4,155 pages. And remember, they passed that bill in the middle of the night. And if you guys think I'm exaggerating, I'm not, because I remember talking about this on the podcast at the time. And Stephanie, we were so fucking floored because the bill was dropped at like 1 a.m. and then lawmakers were given less than 48 hours to read it before the vote. And it had like 1.7 trillion in spending and a shit ton of money to Ukraine and all this climate bullshit and then a bunch of shady side projects. And nobody knew what they were, right? And
Yep.
it was voted on and passed and nobody fucking read it. So it's the hypocrisy of this move by the left. It's just so obvious. And it wasn't just Biden's omnibus bill. Like, how many times during his administration did Democrats advance bills that were passed through reconciliation with absolutely no transparency and no notice? And I knew there were others, so I asked our GPT to recall some of them for me. There was the Inflation Reduction Act, which was 750 pages that was finalized overnight and passed by reconciliation that didn't get read. The American Rescue Plan was 628 pages, got passed, wasn't read. The Build Back Better plan had modified drafts that were done like in the dead of night with no time for public or members of Congress to even know what the fuck was in it. And what did Democrats say at the time? They said that, quote, page reading requested by Republicans was an obstruction tactic, and they argued that staff can read summaries. So I want to read some quotes from Democrat senators during Biden's term. Nancy Pelosi in 2021, in regards to the omnibus bill, said, quote, you don't read the whole bill in one sitting. That's why we have committees to go over these things, end quote. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki back in March of 2021, when she was asked how lawmakers could pass the American Rescue Plan without reading the 628 pages, and she said, quote, that's why we have committees, staff, and hearings, end quote. Senator Dick Durbin on the American Rescue Plan in 2021. Quote, we have professional staff, committees, and hearings for a reason. These bills are complex and can't be read in one sitting, end quote. And my favorite hypocrite quote of them all is from the same man who's demanding that Trump's 1,700-page bill be read out loud on the Senate floor. And that is Senator Chuck Schumer, who, when it came to Biden's 4,100 plus omnibus spending bill, said, quote, no one expects any member to read every single line. We have staff and committees to parse the details, and that's how this process works, end quote. And yet now you're the champion of transparency and you want every single word read out loud because you're protecting democracy. Like, give me a fucking break. You're in agreement with a shady bill when you don't want anyone to really understand what's in it. And then it's perfectly acceptable to say, oh, it's too complex and you can't read it in one sitting, and that's why we have staff. But when you want to cockblock the American agenda and the Trump admin and play these fuck games to slow down the process, you want the whole thing read out loud on the Senate floor. And you know what? I honestly don't even think that's a bad thing. Frankly, I think this should be done with every single bill, and it should be televised for the American public because we should all have the opportunity to know in advance what's in every one of these bills. So I am not arguing that this is wrong or bad. What I'm arguing is the complete hypocrisy of the pretend transparency and this like feigned concern for protecting democracy from someone who's been complicit in endless shady deals and who was a literal vocal proponent of total lack of transparency by forcing votes without giving other members of Congress time to read bills and then calling it an obstruction tactic when they tried. So, no, you're the obstruction tactic, pulling a political stunt basically just to stall Trump's agenda. And it's just, again, complete hypocrisy and theatrics as usual.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said that we should have to read it out loud. And
Mhm.
maybe if that were the case, they would quit trying to pass all of these ridiculous, 1,000-page bills at giving like 48 hours to review it. Because that's what the Democrats did. There was like a time limit. I mean, you had
Yeah.
no time, even with their staff all pitching in and reading it. You didn't have time to do that. And that's just ridiculous. You're going to sign something into law that no one has fully read. So, yeah, I wish Mike Johnson would get back to what he promised, which was they're going to do standalone bills. They're going to give ample time to read through it. And I agree with what you said, like do it where the American public can watch if they want to. Um,
And and I want to say one more thing because what's the deadline? Like 4th of July is when the House goes on
that's when
recess.
Trump, yeah, that's when Trump wanted
Okay.
it on his desk.
Okay. Well, from what I understand, Republicans are now saying that they're hoping to have the bill done by Wednesday, by July 2nd. So I guess we'll see in a couple days.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like the Democrats, they get away with this shit because they all stand together. Like we saw that throughout the Biden administration, they all vote together. There's no one that dissents from the party. And Republicans don't do that. And I don't think everyone should do that, but it does give the Democrats an advantage. That's how they get away with this shit because there's power in numbers and they all stick together. Um, I saw Trump was asked, like, do you think the bill will actually get passed on the 4th of July like you wanted? And he was like, I'm not even going to answer that because, yeah, I want it to get passed. But if it doesn't, then you're going to go and call it a big failure and use my clip of saying it will get passed. So he's like, I'm hopeful, but I'm not making any promises. I'm like, he's got to play all these games with the reporters too.
Yeah, and I just double checked because I, eh, I hope our GPT is giving me accurate information, but I asked if Massey voted on it, and he did. He voted on it.
Did it say if he, I mean, obviously he voted
Yes,
against
it
it,
did.
right?
Big, beautiful. No? Oh, yeah. So Trump, yeah, targeted Massey as a grandstander. But the bottom line, oh, no, he did. He voted no. And he's
Hmm.
still opposing. Oh, because he's in the House, not the Senate. So that didn't count for this Senate vote. Never mind.
Oh, I thought he was in the Senate. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's a House rep.
Okay. Well, that's why.
I think.
So
I
he
don't,
was
I
probably the
may
holdout from
be
it passing in
wrong.
the House. Well, at least it went through and Ron Johnson, I'm kind of surprised Ron Johnson was going to vote against it in the first place, but at least he switched and it can move through and my gosh, like we can move on to something else.
Okay, you know how I said like my mind is like all over the place?
Hmm.
I don't know what I'm talking about. Um, yeah, he is. He's a House rep, not a senator. I had to double check and confirm. So that is why he was not
I
part of this
thought for sure he
process.
was a senator. I don't know why I thought that, but okay.
Oh, all right, moving on.
Moving on. All right, so this is going to be super weird, but I'm going to go completely off topic onto something that's a little conspiracy-ish, but there's stuff playing out in the media, and so you may not have seen any of this, Tara, because I mean it's all over TikTok. TikTok. Oh my God, I just like choked as I was talking. It's all over TikTok, but I don't think the mainstream is really giving all the details. Okay, so last week, I think it was around the 25th, 26th, there were thousands of reports all over the Southeast about objects that look like meteors or like fireballs falling out of the sky in the middle of the day, broad daylight. And I've seen so many videos. They're coming in from Alabama, Tennessee, a ton in Georgia. Everything from like ring doorbell footage to dash cams and people pulling out their phones and recording. And they're all submitting videos that all look like the same type of object, which looks like a glowing fireball that's shooting down like a rocket. And what looked like a massive explosion was shown on a weather radar covering like half the state of Alabama. And this has been confirmed by like the experts. Like, yes, there was something that showed up on radar. What it was is being debated now. So like one of the weather tracker posts said, quote, at approximately 3:48 p.m. on June 26th, an unknown anomaly spanning thousands of square miles was detected by weather radar over central Alabama. The massive anomaly remained stationary for roughly 20 minutes before disappearing. So some people are saying, "Oh, it was just like a glitch in the system." But here's the thing. That was a weather radar. The flight tracker radar thing also showed an object moving incredibly fast, like way faster than any aircraft could go, and then disappearing into the ocean. So NASA, after like that comes out, NASA is officially saying that it was a 3 foot wide asteroid fragment wiping out 27 miles above western Georgia, traveling at 30,000 miles per hour, releasing energy equivalent to 20 tons of TNT. And apparently it caused a sonic boom and ground tremors. But that's in Georgia, okay? That doesn't explain what people were seeing in Tennessee and Alabama and these other states where they see the fireball come down and then there's nothing. Like they're expecting a big explosion or a boom and nothing, silence. And so there's something weird happening. And I feel like we're only getting like a sliver of the actual story. So then on top of that, people are hearing these like loud banging sounds in the sky in Maryland, Florida, Georgia, like all over. It's not thunder. It almost sounds like there's, a air fight going on and no one can explain it. And I almost talked about this on Friday's episode, but I didn't really think it was that big of a deal until I saw kind of what's unfolded afterwards. So within hours of this supposed asteroid hitting, over 1,000 flights were canceled out of Atlanta, and even the air traffic control tower had to be evacuated. And the official reason is extreme weather. Okay, this is one of the busiest airports in the entire world, and it shut down air traffic control for hours. It disrupted the entire East Coast air grid. Planes were landed, not allowed to go up, and they're saying extreme weather, hail specifically. One of the airlines told passengers that, oh, there was an unusual hailstorm and it damaged some of the planes. What? Like, this is such a bullshit answer.
The planes, like I can see, by the way, I don't know anything about any of this because I haven't seen any of it, but I can rationalize them not flying in that weather, but when have they ever shut down the control tower for weather?
Right. And that's the thing. The air traffic control towers, they are built to like withstand a lot, like lightning, hail, wind. I mean, they're hardened facilities. And that was shut down. And then the entire East Coast airspace is affected all because of a hailstorm. It just doesn't sound right. Like something's going on. They deal with storms all the time. The only time I've heard of them shutting down is when there's like an actual massive hurricane that is about to hit. And that, you get notice. They let you know ahead of time. It's kind of a big deal. And this, they're just like, oh, no big deal. Like it's shut down because of extreme weather. But they're not really getting specific on what weather and what happened and, everything else. So there's that portion of it. Well, then now the FBI is involved. And they're saying, oh, hey, airline systems are going to be disrupted all throughout the 4th of July weekend, and all these flights are going to be canceled. But they're blaming it on hackers, saying, oh, we think there's going to be hackers that are hacking into the airline systems trying to steal information. And it just sounds so suspicious. Like, is it really hackers, or are they keeping an eye on whatever the hell is happening in the sky? Because I don't, for one second, think this is all a coincidence, that there just happens to be these meteor things everywhere. And then this airport shut down, and then the FBI is like giving a warning that airspace is going to could potentially be disrupted all week long, but that's because of hackers. I don't think so.
I did see a couple articles about airlines that have been hacked recently. So, if I'm going to come at this from a logical perspective, which I'm just playing devil's advocate here for a second,
Hmm.
it is 4th of July weekend, which is a big celebration of America. And with all the countries that hate America right now, maybe that's a possibility. But the timing of that with all this weird weather shit, mm, that's questionable.
Yeah. It is. So even though I was kind of pissed at our GPT, and we'll talk about that in another episode, um, I asked it, like, what am I missing here? Is there another explanation of what's been happening in the sky aside from an asteroid fragment? And it gave multiple possibilities. So I'm going to list them all, and then I'm going to tell you what I think sounds the most logical. So, first, it says it could have been a classified satellite or experimental military tech falling out of orbit. The military has numerous black satellites. Some are nuclear powered, some are surveillance, and a failure could trigger this exact kind of impact. So the fireball may have just been like engineered debris that was re-entering Earth's atmosphere. So why would they hide it? Because admitting that the DoD or DARPA had a satellite that failed and crashed onto US soil would not be good for national security optics. Another possibility that it gave is that it could be a failed test or takedown of a low Earth orbit platform, possibly Chinese or Russian. So Starlink type platforms are capable of being like repurposed for offensive capabilities. It's called kinetic bombardment or rods from God. So that's another possibility. Then there's the false flag angle, which we've talked about. Everyone's warning there's going to be some type of false flag event. This is saying, what if it was a drill or a live test of government protocols? A meteor makes the perfect cover story for Space Defense System activation or ATC emergency shutdown exercises. The radar anomaly in Alabama, airport shutdowns, and aircraft inspections could have been dry runs for bigger ops. Why hide it? Because the public isn't supposed to know we're practicing for like a grid shutdown or wartime airspace lockdown. And what's interesting with this theory and why I'm kind of leaning towards it is I came across an article from the Defense Post saying that, quote, the U.S. Naval Surface Warfare Center, Dahlgren, has received its first ever high power microwave system prototype, purpose built to counter drone swarms. It'll be used to support the Marines' HPM testing in low altitude air defense missions and enhance its ground based air defense capabilities. So I don't know, maybe they're doing training with this, which would make sense because they say that drones are like the biggest threat right now in, war. So then I find another article from MIT Technology Review, and this one says, quote, every branch of the service and a host of defense tech startups are testing out new weapons that promise to disable drones en masse. They are drones that slam into other drones like battering rams. There are drones that shoot out nets to ensnare quadricopter propellers, precision guided Gatling guns that simply shoot drones out of the sky, electronic approaches like GPS jammers and direct hacking tools, and lasers that melt holes clear through a target's side. Then there are the microwaves, high powered electronic devices that push out kilowatts of power to zap the circuits of a drone as if it were the tinfoil you forgot to take out of your leftovers when you heated them up. So, maybe they're testing out these microwave weapons and it's looking like meteors falling from the sky, but maybe it's drones that were zapped and they're, you know what I mean? Like they're testing out how to take out drones. I think that's The most likely. I swear I heard, I think it was Marco Rubio saying how like drones are the biggest concern for them right now. And we had the drone thing a few months ago where there were drones everywhere,
We literally live in a sci-fi movie.
right? And then, of course, there's the possibility of like a UAP because of the speed, energy output, and electromagnetic effects. And that's not what you would expect from just like a fragment of an asteroid. So the GPT said UFO sightings are often accompanied by radar anomalies and EMP type fallout. Blue sky lightning, which I'm going to talk about next, electronic failures, and tower evacuations could signal an electromagnetic field disruption, which is common with high energy objects or craft. Which, by the way, like I think is a lot of these UAPs, UFOs, whatever you want to call them, are our military testing out these new fancy weapons. So this brings me to the next weird thing that happened, and it happened here in Florida where a man died on his honeymoon from being struck by lightning. Now, being struck by lightning is not odd in Florida. Happens all the time. Tampa is the lightning capital of the world. But what makes it odd is the sky was totally blue. Clear sky, no clouds, no storms, and he is struck by lightning like out of nowhere. And so the news is calling this blue sky lightning. And they say apparently it can happen when a storm is miles away and a lightning bolt just happens to hit someone miles away, even though there's not a cloud in the sky. So that's concerning if that's true. But I'm thinking like there's something going on and the military is testing out this new technology. And that's why they had to shut down the airspace. And that's why, you know, GPS and radars and all of these things are showing these weird anomalies. And what better way to just say, like, oh, NASA, just say it's part of an asteroid. And then we'll just tell the the airport that it's a hailstorm and call it a day and nobody really questions it. That's my theory.
Oh my God, this is so crazy. And I hadn't really seen any of this, so I'm still trying to process what you just said.
And you have a headache. You're like, what the hell are you talking about?
Oh my God, if it's not like it's the drone thing, the drones designed to shoot down and capture other drones. It's literally just a fucking sci-fi movie. So we've got that shit going on with the terrorist shit going on, with the global crap going on. It's like, is there anything that's not concerning?
Nope. Nope.
No,
Not
and
really.
speaking of the terrorism side of things, this isn't exactly terrorism, but remember on Friday we were talking about how Zohran Mamdani, the self-described Democrat socialist and member of the Democratic Socialists of America, who shocked the world by winning the Democratic primary on June 24th. Well, the latest controversy with this guy is apparently he's refusing to condemn the phrase globalize the intifada. So listen to this clip from an interview that he did yesterday with NBC's Kristen Welker on Meet the Press.
What New Yorkers want more than anything is a vision that binds us all together. I want to ask you about an issue that has divided some New Yorkers in recent weeks. You were recently asked about the term globalize the intifada, if it makes you uncomfortable. In that moment, you did not condemn the phrase. Now, just so folks understand, it's a phrase that many people hear as a call to violence against Jews. There's been a lot of attention on this issue. So I want to give you an opportunity to respond here and now. Do you condemn that phrase, globalize the intifada? That's not language that I use. The language that I use and the language that I will continue to use to lead this city is that which speaks clearly to my intent, which is an intent grounded in a belief in universal human rights. And ultimately, that's what is the foundation of so much of my politics, the belief that freedom and justice and safety are things that to have meaning have to be applied to all people, and that includes Israelis and Palestinians alike. But do you actually condemn it? I think that's the question and the outstanding issue that a number of people, both of the Jewish faith and beyond, have.
Do you condemn that phase, globalize the intifada, which a lot of people hear as a call to violence against Jews?
I've heard from many Jewish New Yorkers who have shared their concerns with me, especially in light of the horrific attacks that we saw in Washington, D.C. and in Boulder, Colorado, about this moment of anti-Semitism in our country and in our city. And I've heard those fears and I've had those conversations, and ultimately they are part and parcel of why in my campaign I've put forward a commitment to increase funding for anti-hate crime programming by 800%. I don't believe that the role of the mayor is to police speech in the manner especially of that of Donald Trump, who has put one New Yorker in jail who's just returned to his family, Mahmoud Khalil, for that very supposed crime of speech. Ultimately, what I think I need to show is the ability to not only talk about something, but to tackle it and to make clear that there's no room for anti-Semitism in this city. We have to root out that bigotry, and ultimately we do that through the actions, and that is the mayor I will be, one that protects Jewish New Yorkers and lives up to that commitment through the work that I do.
But quickly, for the people who care about the language and who feel really concerned by that phrase, why not just condemn it?
My concern is to start to walk down the line of language and making clear what language I believe is permissible or impermissible takes me into a place similar to that of the president, who is looking to do those very kinds of things, putting people in jail for writing an op-ed, putting them in jail for protesting. Ultimately, it's not language that I use. It's language I understand there are concerns about. And what I will do is showcase my vision for the city through my words and my actions.
Stephanie, she asked him 3 times and he could not condemn the phrase.
Sleeper cell. This guy is a freaking sleeper cell. He's calling for global intifada. Are you kidding me? He's a freaking sleeper cell. Arrest him, terrorist.
Dude, I've got more, okay? Because this guy also went on a podcast called The Bulwark, and then he tried to soften this idea by comparing the phrase to the use of the word intifada as a description of the Holocaust. And specifically, he said, quote, "That very word has been used by the Holocaust Museum when translating the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising into Arabic because it's a word that means struggle," end quote. So his argument was, if the museum used the word intifada in Arabic to describe a translation of an uprising of Jews against the Nazis, then it should just be understood that it's in the context of a struggle and not violence. So
okay, with everything that has happened, especially like in New York at these universities, we know damn well the way people perceive that word. And that is not what he's saying. Like, he is calling for violence against Jews. That's what he's doing.
Yes, so not surprisingly, the U.S. Holocaust Museum quickly issued a very sharp rebuke, and they called his comparison, quote, "outrageous and especially offensive to survivors." And they also said that since 1987, during what was actually called the First Intifada, which was the start of widespread Palestinian violent uprisings against Israel, that since then Jews have been attacked and murdered under the banner of Intifada. And everyone knows the word is globally synonymous with violent resistance and attacks on Jews and Israelis. And Stephanie, I'm going to give you a guess or two. Who's defending him? Who in Congress is defending him?
Well, probably AOC for sure. Isn't she like his biggest cheerleader?
She surprisingly has not said anything yet since this interview. But give me another name.
Probably the reason why is because doesn't New York City have like one of the largest Jewish populations? So a lot of her constituents are probably like, what the hell?
Yeah. Well, the ones who are speaking out, not surprising, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Andre Carson, and then Latifah Simon from California. They all issued a joint statement a couple days ago condemning what they called the, quote, "vile anti-Muslim and racist smears against Mamdani." But some Democrats that I think are pretty far left are really not happy with this. And one of them is Democrat House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And he's from New York. And he went on ABC News. And he said that globalizing the intifada is not an acceptable phrase, and that Mamdani is going to have to clarify his position moving forward. So I want to play that quick clip.
You mentioned the diversity of your district, including a lot of Jewish constituents. Mamdani has made comments that some have said veer towards anti-Semitism. His initial statement after October 7th, he criticized the Israeli government, but didn't criticize Hamas. He defended the use of the word globalize, or the phrase globalize intifada. And he even said that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu should be arrested, or he would, if he were mayor, he would arrest Netanyahu if he visited New York City. Do these things concern you? Globalizing the intifada, by way of example, is not an acceptable phrase, and he's going to have to clarify his position on that as he moves forward. With respect to the Jewish communities that I represent, I think our nominee is going to have to convince folks that he is prepared to aggressively address the rise in anti-Semitism in the city of New York, which has been an unacceptable development. And any mayor, whether you're a Democratic mayor, a Republican mayor, an independent mayor, has got to commit to the safety and well-being of all of the people of the city of New York. And when there are moments of crisis and a rise in anti-Jewish hate, that's a threshold, of course, needs to be crossed.
So I'm wondering, is this guy going to have some issues now?
I think so. I think initially he was running on like he's this socialist that's going to give free shit to everyone and people fell for it. But I think now that he's getting national attention and he's saying stuff like this, he's going to have a problem because I just looked it up and New York City has the largest Jewish population of any city worldwide outside of Israel. It's about 12% of the city's total population. So I hope that they show up and make their voices heard and vote because what the hell? Like, why would any Jewish person vote for this guy? This is insane. And I cannot believe that we are in a world where like this is happening and there's actually people that are standing up for him
I
after,
know.
after this thing called the Holocaust that happened
But
not
look
that
who
long
those
ago.
people are, right? Like, I guess it's not a surprise. But I think he's about to alienate another part of the population, which I think is pretty strong in New York, because in this same interview, Welker asked him if he thinks billionaires have a right to exist. And here's his response. He said, quote, I don't think we should have billionaires. Frankly, it's so much money in a moment of such inequality. And ultimately, what we need more of is equality across our city, across our state, and across our country. And I look forward to working with everyone, including billionaires, to make a city that is fairer for everyone, end quote. So I don't know about you, but I think that's a pretty clear socialist platform where it doesn't matter how hard you work for your money. You're under his rule, you're going to fucking share it with people who haven't earned it. So good luck getting them to vote for you.
Oh yeah, I saw an interview and it was I forget maybe it was like NBC or CBS. It was like one of the big networks that usually is pretty left leaning. And they were really pushing on him hard, which surprised me over what he's been saying on all these different interviews and podcasts, which is that he has a proposal to shift property taxes onto, quote, richer and whiter neighborhoods. And so the host was like, why are you bringing race into this? Like, why are you making this about, white people or non-white people? And just like the Intifada thing, he was asked like 3 or 4 times if he wants to retract what he said and say it in a different way. And he refused. Like he was basically saying, no, things need to be equitable. And these areas have paid less than their fair share. And so he wants the white neighborhoods to pay more than the other neighborhoods, which is like, this is discrimination. This is racism, just like what Harmeet Dhillon was saying. You can still discriminate against white people. Like, you can't just pick and choose which race is superior. Like, that is literally racism. It's crazy.
Yeah, Trump slammed him a couple days ago as a 100% communist lunatic and said he's very bad for New York. And he said that if Mamdani does get elected, that federal funds to New York City could be withheld if he doesn't do the right thing. And then Rep. Andy Ogles from Tennessee wrote a letter to the DOJ urging an investigation into Mamdani's citizenship. And he's calling for denaturalization proceedings, saying that there's possible suspected support for terrorism. And I guess part of this is related to controversial rap lyrics from a video that Mamdani did back in 2018, where he was praising something called the Holy Land Five. And I guess it's a group of individuals who are convicted for fundraising for Hamas. So we also have reps Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nancy Mace, and Elise Stefanik, who are backing calls for revoking his citizenship based on political and religious grounds. So I guess we will see how truly fucked up New York is as we watch this whole thing unfold in the next few months. Because I think the election is in November.
And he's only been in the United States for what, like 6 years?
Yeah,
Like,
something like that.
that's why I'm saying, like, this, how do we know he's not a sleeper cell? Because that sounds like a global cry for like terrorism when you say global intifada. Like, what,
Right.
how else is that supposed to be
And you
interpreted?
and you are point blank asked if you want to, clarify that or
Asked
take a
three
stand.
times.
Yeah, and you don't answer, you dance around the question and say a bunch of other shit and don't directly answer the question. Anybody who can't fucking directly answer a question is lying. Like,
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to see how the Jewish people of New York vote because I'm sure a lot of them have like Trump derangement syndrome or like are more left leaning and the whole socialist thing sounds wonderful, but hopefully now that all of this is coming out and he's making it very clear where he stands, it'll be enough to wake people up. But I mean, it's just really concerning that someone like this could be, heading up like our biggest city and economy and this is their viewpoint. Like it's what the hell is happening here?
yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, we're gonna have to watch this closely. I'm committed now. Like I want to see where this goes. I don't even know when the actual election is, but I'm gonna be watching every move.
I think it's November. I don't know for sure, but I think it's November.
Yeah, so a lot can happen between now and then. The problem is New Yorkers don't have any good candidates. Like they're already pissed at Adams and Cuomo was already disgraced and they just didn't have good people, step up to the plate. So I don't know. It's going to be a close call, probably.
Yeah, we'll see.
Wow, what a
Yeah, I
weekend.
just looked it up. It's scheduled for November 4th.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so we're probably going to be seeing a lot of him, which is concerning because if he's saying stuff like this and pretty much every single news network is like interviewing him, he's basically putting his signal out to the world of like what if that phrase is like a sleeper cell phrase?
Right.
I know I sound crazy, but like, I mean,
I
it's
don't
not
think
that
so.
far-fetched, you know?
I
They've
don't
been
think you
arresting
sound
people.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, you go take care of your headache. I hope you feel better.
Yeah.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. That was a lot for a Monday morning. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday.